differentiating between Southern and Northern Italians. And certainly the greatest desirability is you want to have a lot of white people. Northern Europeans were the most desirable: English, Scots, Irish, Germans, Scandinavians. Okay? If you believe in this notion of social DNA, you can see that within our system, it's ingrained in terms of making financial investment decisions based on race and ethnicity. That doesn't go away overnight, okay? Just because the Supreme Court said, don't do this anymore, or the Congress said, don't do this anymore, and the Appraisers Society reluctantly moved this out and don't take it into account. 20 years ago, many years after this system, this was removed, I had the pleasure of going out with for a few refreshments after 5 o'clock, iced tea, if you will, with a bank president. Not a big bank, but local bank here in Boston. And he brought along a friend of his who did a lot of work for the bank, who was his main appraiser. So we had a few iced teas, and conversation was a lot more direct and lucid. And I remember asking the appraiser, the bank president asked the appraiser, saying, you know, the way I met Carrass is we served on this mortgage review board together, and we looked at cases of discrimination, and sometimes he and I agreed, sometimes we didn't agree, but you know, he was the public representative appointed by the governor, I was the bank representative, and we became friends. So tell us, how did you take race into account when you appraised a property? How did you figure out, well, first of all, did race matter? And he said, absolutely, absolutely. The number one thing he looked at, less than 20 years ago. And he said, well, how did you do it? Did you look at statistics, data, census tract data? No, that stuff was worthless. I said, what did you do? He said, I'd go to the schoolyards of the local school. And at that time, I don't know if they have recess anymore. I understand they don't have recess at a lot of school systems. But when I grew up, and at that time, they had recess, and the kids would go out in the schoolyard and play for 15, 20 minutes. He said he would go around 10:30 when he knew the recess was being held, and he'd take a look at the children. And if he estimated that at least 25% of the children were African American, he knew the neighborhood was going to flip. Because 25% to him, and probably to many others as well, 25% African American, we can tolerate up to 25%. But once it goes over 25, it's a tipping point, and then the decline of more blacks moving in and whites racing out of that neighborhood will take place. So in his mind, he knew those neighborhoods that were going to tip into being predominantly African American. And once he knew that, then he would discount the property value because blacks were moving in. Okay, that's how ingrained it was in the system.